I would say that most people need both. So, and certain kinds of therapy and certain kinds of meditation are better for different people. I certainly have investigated most of them that are currently available, and find that for me and others who are like me, meaning that they like what I like, and they're that this combination of what are parts-based therapy and direct practice, effortless mindfulness works really well together, and one or the other is missing something. It seems like the people who are coming from therapy often will just soothe their ego and clear some trauma and emotional life, and similarly, but a different path, those who are just doing preliminary practices or even kind of too much pure awareness practice, like I am the awareness and there is no self, and I've gone beyond all self, but my partner thinks I'm spaced out. What do you think? I think you're spaced out. Your partner's right. Because you can go to this kind of almost pure awareness, disembodied sense of no self, or analyzing all that away. But it's almost like what you're doing there is you're using this kind of different lenses of reality along this continuum. And it's important to have kind of the multidimensional higher and lower dimensions, because from the pure awareness on this side to the energetic practices here, to the seeing of the deconstruction, it's only thoughts, feelings, sensations, there's no solid self, to doing these, kind of focused calming practices, or then starting to do mindfulness-based cognitive therapy here, and then now you're doing more body-based practices, and then you're doing trauma work here, but only doing trauma work that doesn't have a spiritual or a consciousness component. And then the middle area, I think, is recognizing that thoughts, feelings, and sensations pattern into what feels like identities or me. So it's not just that we have one ego that we got to get rid of or make peace with, but that there's, a strong managing part. But then everyone knows immediately that there's this self-talk between, whether you call it personas or parts or sub-personalities. There's a long history of this from back to Carl Jung, who called it personas, and Gestalt therapy that would take parts of you and have them sit out in a chair, and you dialogue with them out externally, and then different systems. But the sense that the identities are functional parts that they've been trying very hard to be me and be safe don't need to be dissected away by meditation, but they need to realize that they are energy at one level, but as soon as they pattern into a functional feeling of going to work, relating to somebody, there's a relationship from true nature to that part, that those parts need to be part of a team, that you can't go without parts. That I'm talking to you now, then I'll talk to my wife, then I'll talk to a friend, then I'll I'll type, and I'll be in a different part of me. So there are traumatic parts that got formed early. Certainly everyone knows the shame-based part, the sense that feels worthless or not good enough, that felt early on by even just developmentally developmental trauma, or small t trauma, it's called. Everyone has this. It's part of growing up and moving from dependent to independent, where you get, as you get trained, like, that, don't touch the stove. No, bad. No, don't touch the stove. Bad. And then the feeling is that the action isn't bad, but I'm bad. Something wrong with me. I'm internalized identity. Shame is internalizing and identifying with that feeling. And then certainly people who have had more extreme big trauma or complex trauma, who have been abused or abandoned, or, have these emotions that form into worldviews, and the only capacity to deal with them is to have a bigger capacity of who you are. So that's where they come together. So I've seen and tried to do psychological work without kind of awake consciousness, and you get only so far. So you can only grow up to a certain level until you have to wake up in order to continue to grow up. Now you can grow up and then wake up and then spiritually bypass, which a lot of, spiritual teachers and gurus have done. And what happens is they have an initial awakening, and then they go to this kind of, what I've found is almost like adolescent developmental stage of like, oh, I'm free. Everything's relative, and there's no problems, and there's no problem to solve, and everything's good. So I'll just do what I want. And then they start, with money and sex and power, they let this almost adolescent, narcissist, primary narcissism come out without looking at that as a part of them. So that's the danger of that spiritual bypass of initial awakening. That's why initial awakening has to lead to coming back to embodiment, humility, interconnection, same, democratization of the realization that nobody's different, nobody's special, everyone's awake. Everyone's awake, precious being. And so those start to work together, so you can start to heal what everyone has. Personal trauma, social trauma, generational trauma. It's basically just misunderstandings that have happened that bind in our consciousness, in our body. In Buddhism, they call it storehouse consciousness, alaya vijnana. So that this has to be then. So rather than doing it like the traditional direct path is renunciation. You start with renunciation of the more Theravada. You become a monk. You renounce family, sex, work, anything pleasurable, and you do a renounce. And then second stage is liberation. So now you start to deal with your emotions, and you try to transform negative into positive. The 5 poisons are transferred into the 5 wisdoms. And then the third stage is direct or realization practice. You realize who you are. And then so I think the better way to do it is direct. So go to realization, and then you can immediately, things, as you said, will be clear. Things will be cleared immediately, and you'll then have the capacity to do liberation, and you won't have to do what needs to be renounced will be clear, because not everything needs to be renounced. There's still work and sex and family life and other things that don't need to be renounced. It's not within those things. Those are the more difficult things, relationship and that have to then stronger drives, food, sex, and comfort, things like that. So those become, because you've found the freedom and the joy that's beyond joy. You don't need to get caught in kind of more addictive cycle of craving and diversion. So that's one way to look at the way those two come together.